Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo, where we throw down error and wrestle with truth and train ourselves to be defenders of the faith. It's great to be with you today. It's going to be a busy day for me. We have a great show in store for you today. In fact, we're going to have, as our guest, Karl Keating is coming into the dojo. And I've been enjoying our segments with Karl. Karl's been coming on and discussing apologetic classics, these great works of the past that, I don't know. They're probably kind of collecting, dust somewhere on somebody's shelf, but they really need to be better known, more widely circulated because they're still good stuff, good stuff. So Karl's been coming on. We've been talking about the classics, for example, John Henry Cardinal Newman's essay, Development of Doctrine, all sorts of good stuff. And today we're going to talk about a 3-volume set, which is one of the first books certainly among the first 10 books I bought when I started getting into apologetics. That's Radio Replies by the radio priest Rumble and Carty. And, of course, Karl Keating's cut his teeth for a number of years in radio doing apologetics. So I'm looking forward to chatting with him and seeing what kind of insights he has about Rumble and Carty, since they were radio priests. And they had this incredible work of question and answers in Radio Replies. So we're going to talk about that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And also, like I said, it's going to be a busy day for me. Not only this, but I'm also going to be on the show after this, which is the Terry and Jesse show. And then after that, I'm going to go to the Pat Flynn show and do an interview. So it's going to be lots of interviews today. I'm going to do my best, folks. That's all the Lord calls us to do, is to do our best. So we also have our Finding the Fallacy. And the Finding the Fallacy for today is the with this, therefore because of this fallacy. And if you want the Latin to impress your friends, it's cum hoc ergo propter hoc. The cum hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, not to be confused with the post hoc ergo propter hoc, after this, therefore because of this. No, this is cum, it's with this. So we'll talk about that. Also, we're going to meet the early church father, who is Leonidas of Byzantium. Leonidas. So good stuff in store for us today on Hands-On Apologetics. And I guess, I'm going to give my shout out early today. I'm going to say hello, everybody watching live stream on Facebook and YouTube. Hello. Great to see you. Great to see familiar names, I should say. Although I wish I could see you, because when you're doing radio, you have to be entertaining to a computer screen and a wall, and that could be difficult. So I actually wish I could see you guys. But anyway, I want to say I appreciate you tuning in, watching the show live stream. Hi, Beth. And it's just good to join in. And also you listening on radio and podcast. It's always a pleasure to present the show to you. So when Karl comes on the show, if you have any questions, give us a call toll free at 888-526-2151. That's 888-526-2151. Or you can always send your questions at handsonapologetics.com, and I do reply to your questions. No Pop-Tarts. No Pop-Tarts today, Beth. Yesterday we did the Dojo Mailbox show, and tell you the truth, folks, I tried my best, but I only made a dent. There's actually some more, so we'll have to do another show like that in the near future. That was a lot of fun. Let's see. Oh, I need to tell you about the we're partnering by the way, Hands-On Apologetics is partnering with John DeRosa of Classical Theism fame, and also with Pat Flynn. And we're going to do a live stream broadcast on YouTube. And this live stream broadcast is going to be us three. We're going to talk about apologetics in the 21st century. It's going to be, and mark your calendars, August 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So myself, Pat Flynn, John DeRosa, we're going to have, each of us is going to give a talk on, apologetics, what you could do to defend your faith, tips, suggestions, things like that. We're going to have a live Q&A session. And, by the way, if you sign up early, you get a bunch of freebies. I know I've been plugging this, but I'm all for freebies. And, by the way, John and Pat, they really know their stuff. And the freebies they're giving away, I think, are pretty cool. For example, you're going to get a 90-minute defense of the Catholic Christian worldview. So each of us is going to take a section of apologetics. Pat's going to do theistic apologetics. I'm going to do Christian apologetics. John's going to do Catholic. We're going to give all that. We're going to record it, and you're going to get that free along with a free ebook if you sign up early for this broadcast. And to do so, just go to my website, which is handsonapologetics.com, and just scroll down underneath the Hands-On Apologetics live banner. You're going to see a white banner that says, "What if we could show you how to never lose a religious argument again?" Just click that, folks. That will take you to the sign-up sheet. You get a free ebook. You'll get the other freebies as well, and and you'll also get an invitation to join us live on YouTube. So good stuff all around. We're trying to partner with other people in the field and to promote Catholic apologetics the most we can. So good stuff happening for us later this month. All right, so why don't we jump into the critical thinking skills for today? And like I said, today's finding the fallacy is with this, therefore, because of this, or cum hoc ergo propter hoc. Okay, so it's very simple fallacy. It says, since event Y followed event X, event Y must be the cause of event X. Okay, so since something is associated with another thing, therefore, it must be that one should be the cause of the other. Okay. Now, like I said, it's very similar to another fallacy that's known by Latin, post hoc ergo propter hoc, which means after this, therefore because of this. That fallacy argues that since something follows another thing, it must be its cause, right? The first thing must be its cause. This one is a little bit more of an association. It's not so much before or after, okay? It's more like this happens when this happens, therefore one must be the cause of others. Now, got some examples I got off the internet. For example, a rooster crows every morning. Therefore, the rooster causes the sun to come up. Okay, so you have association of two things, and you make one thing the cause of the other, which of course is fallacious, not true. Or how about this? Hospitals are full of sick people. Therefore, hospitals make sick people. Right? Got the same thing. Association, and it's a misplaced causality. You're putting a causal factor where it doesn't belong. Or sometimes this person acts violently when I'm around. Therefore, I must be the cause of him acting that way. Okay? Again, that's our fallacy. Cum hoc ergo propter hoc. With this, therefore, because of this. And of course, the key here, folks, is to try to establish a causal link. It's not enough just to assume that since two things happen together, that one must be the cause of the other. Just like it's not necessarily true that because one follows the other, it must be a defect that follows the cause. You need some sort of causal link. Okay, and this, I think, in the realm of apologetics, defending the faith, I personally think that cum hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy occurs a lot with the mythicist, who, they will see similarities in, there's Christians and then there's pagans, and since the Christians do something similar to the pagans, they'll say, well, paganism actually, caused or it Christians copied from pagans because they're associated with one another or they're next to one another or something like that. I'm sure it occurs many other places, and that's why, folks, we got to be sharp in our critical thinking skills. We got to look for those causal links, the smoking gun, so to speak, that establishes a cause and effect relationship. All right, so that is our fallacy for today, the cum hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. And let's jump to our Meet the Early Church Father. And the early church father we're going to meet is Leontius of Byzantium, who was born sometime around AD 500, died sometime around AD 543. Guess that would make a lot more sense than 500 to 543. Wow, I'm switching my numbers today. Who is Leontius of Byzantium? Well, he's a man of great obscurity. We don't really know. We have his writings, but we're not really sure exactly which Leontius this is. Let's see. One scholar named Loof identified him with, Leonidas. I kind of lost my place here. With a Gothic monk named Leonidas. But that apparently is not true. There's also the possibility that he may have been the theological advisor to the Emperor Justinian. And ultimately, he's responsible for the condemnation of Justinian on the 3 chapters. That doesn't seem very likely. Instead, the best theory amongst patrologists, those who study the early church fathers, is he's a hermit and an Origenist, follower of Origen. And he's best known for his 3 books against Nestorian and Eutyches that was written around AD 543. So that's our Meet the Early Church Father, Leontius of Byzantium. Coming up on the other side of the break, we're going to be chatting with Karl Keating about radio replies. Stay tuned, folks. It's going to be a lot of fun.
This is Terry Barber reminding you there's a women's conference coming up September 7th, 2019 at the Sacred Heart Chapel. Mary Danielle Barber will be speaking along with Barbara Nicolosi. They're going to be talking about true femininity, be who you are. This is going to be for your daughters, your mothers. Every woman should be at this conference. And the way to do it is go to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. You are listening to Hands-On Apologetics, and we are going to talk about one of the older classical works in apologetics, namely Radio Replies, that was written by Fathers Rumble and Carty, and to help kind of explore this interesting and I think very valuable work. We have Karl Keating. Karl Keating, by the way, is the founder of Catholic Answers, which is the premier Catholic apostolate in the Northern Hemisphere, if not with the world. Nowadays, Karl's a full-time author. He's written over 16 books, which, of course, among the top of them are Catholicism, Fundamentalism, Debating Catholicism series, Book for Life, No Apology. And he also writes in several different genres, not just apologetics, but also religion, literature, outdoor, self-publishing, and even fiction. And you can check out all of, or most of Karl's great works at www.karlkeating.com. And Karl, welcome to Hands-On Apologetics.
Gary, it's great to be back with you, and it's exciting to be talking about a 3-volume set that was instrumental in your development as an apologist and in mine.
Yes, Radio Replies. You know, before I forget, Karl, during the break, our live stream audience asked, Karl, are you ever? Is there any possibility that you're going to revisit Catholicism and fundamentalism, maybe make a updated and expanded version?
You know, the publisher asked me to do that a few years ago, and I realized that if I did, I'd really have to rewrite the whole book. The first half of it concerns various anti-Catholics and anti-Catholic ministries that were rather effective, unfortunately, at the time I wrote the book, more than 30 years ago now. That half would have to be entirely redone because all those people are either no longer operational, or they're deceased, or their ministries are of no essential effect now.
Right.
The second half of the book is about particular doctrines and establishing them from scripture, common sense, and history. I wouldn't have to do too much there, I think, because I think my arguments, when I do glance back at the book occasionally, still hold up pretty well. And occasionally I'll dip into Catholicism and fundamentalism on some subject that that's been slipping from my mind maybe recently. I'll read what I wrote about it and say, hey, you know, that's pretty well written. It's a good argument. So I think that half at least would have to be redone, but it would be a major job to recast the other part. So
That's true.
I think probably what I would do instead is to write an entirely different book and come at it, because also there are issues today that, you know, maybe are more important to address than some of the ones that I looked at in Catholicism and fundamentalism. But I do think that, at least as far as dealing with fundamentalists and even evangelicals are concerned, I do think I handled nearly everything that was coming up at that time and still even today.
Yes, yeah, I agree. You know, your argumentation certainly still has legs. It's really good and very well written, and I use it all the time. So, that's a good point. But I think the audience wants more of a good thing. That we've enjoyed it so much over the years. Yeah, we want more.
Well, I'll keep that in mind as I continue plugging along very slowly on my writing projects.
Yeah, very good, very good. Well, yeah, Rumble and Carty, like you said, very influential. It certainly helped me. I went through the set, I don't know how many times, just trying to get my sea legs for defending the faith. When did you first encounter Rumble and Carty?
You know, I don't know how I came across them. I'm looking now at the 3-volume set that I have that was published by the old Tan Books and Publishers that used to be located in Rockford, Illinois. And this edition is a reprint, photo reprint, really, of the original edition. And this one was from 1979. So it couldn't have been too much after that I first picked up these volumes. And I think maybe we should explain a little bit about what we're talking about here.
Yes.
Radio Replies is a 3-volume set consisting of nothing but questions and answers. And there are a lot of questions and answers. Altogether, between the 3 volumes, there are 4,374 of them, That's a lot.
Yes.
And we talked about Rumble and Carty as the authors, but there's a bit of an imprecision in that. The way this occurred is that Father Leslie Rumble, who was an Australian, had a radio program in Sydney, Australia, where he would answer questions on the air. And this went on for quite some time, and eventually he published the first volume of Radio Replies in Australia in 1938. And as I say, the volumes I have are apparently photo reproductions of that original volume. You can sort of tell from the typography. Yeah. And the remarkable thing about Rumble, who lived in a time when anti-Catholic sentiment among Protestants was even stronger than when I wrote Catholicism and Fundamentalism, which came 50 years later, actually, to the year from the first volume of Radio Replies. He was remarkable in that he was very calm but straightforward and sometimes even witty in his remarks, in his answers to questions. And he took questions from all over the place. And they were so well received that a priest in the United States, Charles Carty, learned about them. He was actually working as a kind of gallivanting missionary in what was called the Campaigners for Christ organization. And he discovered this first volume of Radio Replies, and he started selling it with other books at his lectures. And he discovered that the Radio Replies was the most popular volume to be sold. But there was a problem for him in that importing the books from Australia was expensive, so he wasn't able to offer them at the price that he hoped. So what he did is he made a deal with Rumble, and he began to reprint the book in the U.S. Well, that proved so successful that Father Rumble continued to produce collections of his Q&As. In 1940, a second volume came out. In 1942, a third. So altogether, as I say, there were more than 4,000 questions and answers that Rumble produced. And these were then all, put into an American edition by Carty. So we've got Rumble and Carty as the authors, but really Carty was an editor and Rumble was the author.
Okay. Yeah, very good. Yeah, like you said, the breadth of the questions that they received, it's from every perspective you can imagine.
It truly is. Most of them would be coming from what we nowadays call fundamentalists in the American context, because that's an American term, fundamentalists or evangelicals. But there were also many questions from atheists, non-believers, people of all sorts of religions, all species of Christianity. So you have a lot of these things in there. And the nice thing about these is that the questions were not written by Rumble. One mistake that we used to see by some Catholic apologists in this country and elsewhere is that they would, this is usually in book form, they would work up the questions and then answer them. I can think of one or two writers, and you may know who I'm talking about, who some years back wrote books of that sort where they would, pose the questions. They invented the Protestant questions, although they were Catholics. And what happens always, it seems, in those cases is that the questions are not really quite as sharp or as pointed as real-life questions are. And so it allows the Catholic apologist to produce a rather easy answer, but you lose that dynamic of a real-life situation. Well, the questions that are found in Radio Replies are actual questions that Rumble got on the air. And so I'm sure they probably cleaned up a few editorially to make them presentable, but otherwise, these are things that really were asked of him. Now, one of the disabilities in the 3 volumes is that there's a fair amount of redundancy. You can go to Volume 1 and find a question that is almost the same in wording as one in Volume 2 or Volume 3. And it might have simply been that Rumble was not inclined to edit out near duplicates, or maybe they didn't realize from the 4,000 plus questions that there were a fair number of those.
Right.
So you've got that. That is an issue. On the other hand, he might have left them in deliberately because people persist in asking some of the same kinds of questions. There are many questions, hundreds of them in these volumes, that are asked but one time because they're very narrow, very precise, and they might be of interest to a relative handful of people. But then there are others that come up in various permutations multiple times. And I suspect it's because lots of people have asked those questions in lots of different ways. And so Rumble was answering, question X, even if it, came in a different guise the next time along. But he would answer it again. A lot of the things had to do with history of the Catholic Church and allegations there. A lot had to do with liturgical matters. So not purely doctrinal things, but, the whole prospectus of Catholic thought and life. All this comes up, which is one of the reasons I think that both you and I have found this series so enjoyable. In a way, it's like an encyclopedia or a dictionary. How many people sit down with an encyclopedia or dictionary and read it straight through?
Right.
But I'm quite sure that you, as I did, sat down with the radio replies and just read them straight through because they were so enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. And the questions, they don't pull punches either. I mean, like you said, the questions are pretty much verbatim, what they said. And they when they had their chance, they certainly took a punch or tried to take a punch at Catholicism.
Yeah. Now, I'm presuming, given that this was 1938 originally for the first volume, and that, Rumble started his radio program sometime before that, I presume, of course, there was no live call-in arrangement. Technology didn't permit that at the time. So questions must have been written in, mailed in to his program. But it does seem that he actually reproduced the questions as they really were. He probably got rid, as I said, would edit out impolitic phrasing or rudeness or something, things that you couldn't put on the air, or at least you shouldn't put on the air. But otherwise, the questions are what he got. And a lot of them are really quite pointed. And when I read them, many of them, I think to myself, if an average Catholic today were posed one of these questions, what would he do? I mean, would he have the presence of mind to say anything intelligent? Some of them seem to come out from left field. It's like, gosh, it's a tough question, but how do I deal with it?
Right. Yeah, very good. Well, we're chatting with Karl Keating about the classic set, Radio Replies, Rumble Cardi. And we've got more to discuss on the other side of the break, so stay tuned, everybody. You're listening to Hands on Apologetics.
This is Terry Barber reminding you there's a women's conference coming up September 7th, 2019 at the Sacred Heart Chapel. Mary Danielle Barber will be speaking along with Barbara Nicolosi. They're going to be talking about true femininity. Be who you are. This is going to be for your daughters, your mothers. Every woman should be at this conference. And the way to do it is go to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with master apologist Karl Keating about the classic work, Radio Replies, which is a 3-volume set with literally thousands of question and answers by the radio priest Rumble, and also with Cardi. And it's a fun read. It's very punchy because, as we were saying right by the end of the break, they didn't tone down the objections. The objections were pretty much in their face. And in fact, Karl, you kind of helped me connect something, because you're right. Back in the, in the 30s, they didn't have technology for call-in shows, so it must be written, and that explains why you will have an objection or a question. He will answer it, and then you'll have follow-ups afterwards. So he must have had the letters in front of him, and he's going through and critiquing them.
Yes, and he's organized in them, because often he'll have several questions on the same general theme. And the questions clearly are from different people, but they're related to the same topic. And so Rumble's able to flesh out a wider argument beyond just the answer to one question. Gary, let me say a few things about him, because he came from a very weird background or life experience that I think helped prepare him to do this work.
Yeah.
Leslie Rumble was born in 1892 and died in 1975. And he was brought up as an Anglican. But when he was 16, his father unexpectedly became a Catholic and insisted the whole family become Catholic. So young Leslie acquiesced, but after 2 years, he went back to being an Anglican.
Okay.
And then, so that was when he was 18. But then when he was 21, he changed again. He joined the Catholic Church. He actually began to study for the priesthood. But then, at that point, Rumble's father announced that he quit the Catholic Church. He just took the rest of the family back to the Anglican Church. And then for more than a decade, Leslie Rumble and his father had controversial correspondence with one another until just before Rumble was ordained, which was in 1927. So he's 35 and therefore a bit of a little late vocation. But just before he's ordained, the father and the rest of the family became Catholic again. And it stayed that way, apparently. So he's coming out of a family with a lot of internal religious feuds. And that no doubt helped him, because Rumble had a living sense of the kinds of complaints that would come up in a very personal aspect.
Yeah.
The publication called the Australian Dictionary of National Biography writes about Rumble and says, using plain language and short sentences and avoiding rhetoric, he spoke 90 words to the minute in a voice like worn sandpaper, giving an effect of common sense and rationality. When anyone asked what the church taught about a specific subject, he quoted the Bible, thus quietly claiming it as the book of the church. He liked to bring in Protestant authorities to support a case and kept the works of many Protestant authors on his shelves. So, 90 words a minute is a pretty good clip to speak. And there are not a few people of, let's say, English or Australian backgrounds who at school are trained to speak quickly. So you end up with a lot of things conveyed in a few minutes. So I can imagine, though, that Rumble had a need to speak quickly because he had so many questions to handle. And, and I don't know how long his program was, but he didn't have the leisure to do, 2 or 3 questions in an hour when maybe he needed to do 20 or 30. I don't know.
Yeah.
But So, but I have an image of him at his very old-fashioned to us radio studio, going through these questions that he's sequenced beforehand from his many listeners, Catholic and Protestant. And of course, he must have so many Protestant listeners because that's where the questions came from.
Right.
There are very few of them that are obviously from Catholics. Most of them are from non-Catholics. And of course, Australia has always had only a minority population of Catholics anyway. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine Rumble sitting there having sequenced the order in which he's going to answer these questions, and then lickety-split he goes through them, giving very winsome and, to me, often convincing and even compelling answers.
Yes. Yeah, he had a remarkable economy for words. You're right. There's not a lot of fluff. He doesn't try to persuade people by fancy rhetoric or something. It's very, very much factual. Here's the case, here's the facts, and then just moves on. He doesn't try to buddy up to the question or anything like that.
No, I presume what he did is actually write out his answers beforehand, before the program aired. Yeah. Because back in those days, everything would have been aired live. So he didn't speak extemporaneously, I think, because you would have needed written responses worked up anyway to produce these books.
True.
So he must have spent a lot of time, going through the questions, choosing the ones to give on any particular program, and then writing out the answers. And so I presume he read his answers like a script, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, he was able to put in a few words a lot of substance. And that was something in my own background as I was beginning to get into apologetics. There's something I tried to learn from Rumble, is that you don't need to speak 100 words in answer to a question if 50 would do, or 50 if 25 would do. Just get to the point, answer the question, so the questioner can understand your answer, and then move on.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's very pithy. And the beautiful thing about it is it makes the 3-volume set very readable. I mean, it's very punchy. He doesn't belabor points. He just hits those points and moves on, and usually there's a follow-up question or two where he will go into more depth or something like that. But, yeah, it's very, very pithy.
Yeah, you've got the volumes are arranged in general topics. For example, Volume 1 has 13 chapters or really segments, let's say. The first one's just about God in general, then man in general, and then religion, what religion is. Then it goes to the religion of the Bible, and then it gets more specific, the Christian faith, and then the definite Christian faith, which is to say the Catholic faith. Okay. And then he follows that up in the middle of the book with a section of questions about the failure of Protestantism. And then it goes on the church and the Bible, the church and her dogmas, her moral teachings, her worship, and so on. The other volumes are similarly arranged, not necessarily with exactly the same sequencing, but pretty close. And so you've got a kind of topic arrangement throughout each of the 3 volumes. And within each one, let's say the segment on God, which is always the first chapter in each book, there's overlapping questions, as I mentioned earlier on. But still, even within any one book, if you read, say, in this case, the first 5 has 6 pages on topic of God, 7 in the second volume, 7 in the third volume. So not too many pages, but a fair number of questions within those pages. And by the time you finish going through them, you've got a good sense of what Christians mean, particularly what Catholics mean when we say God. Who is God? What is God? And Rumble spells that out very well. And he ends up conveying a lot of the substance of what you might otherwise require some books to read in entirety. He conveys the substance very shortly, just a few pages.
Yeah, that is gold in itself. Because if someone maybe you have an email, folks, from somebody that's has objections against Catholicism, and you don't feel like writing pages, you could just go to Rumble and Carty and just get an idea how to put in a simple paragraph.
I've done that countless times over the last 30 years. I wouldn't be able to count how many times that somebody's asked me a question and I'm not quite sure how I want to phrase an answer. Or occasionally, I may not even know the answer, and I can turn to Rumble, look in the index, and then look at those one or two pages that are dealing with that particular theme, and I can then formulate my own answer, trying not to plagiarize his words, but at least he's identified almost always successfully, I think, what the core issue is really behind a question that's being asked. Because that's the thing too that as you and I as apologists have learned over the years, sometimes the question as stated isn't quite the question that the stater has in mind.
Right.
A person asks something, but there's really something deeper or more implied in the question, and you need to be able to handle that element and not just the bare surface sense of the question if you're to change that person's opinion. So I think Rumble was quite good in doing that. So he'd often see the next step beyond a question to the underlying point and address that also.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, now that you mention it, yeah, there are several replies where I thought, boy, why is he's not really addressing the question. He's addressing something, a different thing, but you're right. He really does identify, what's the most fundamental objection really being stated, not necessarily what they said.
I mentioned earlier on in the program, Charles Carty, the American priest who ended up reprinting these books. And I did say that he worked in a group called the Catholic Campaigners for Christ. What he did back in these days, late 30s, early 40s, he said he spent his summers on campaign, as he put it, where he would actually drive around in an automobile that was apparently shifted out to be a lecture platform. Mm-hmm. And he would go around on using loudspeakers and set up his post in a town and talk. And then from the trunk, basically, of the vehicle, he'd sell books or whatever, to pass the faith along that way. So, but as a Catholic campaigner for Christ, he was doing the same kind of operation that David Goldstein did. He's somebody that you and I mentioned in the previous program. Mm-hmm. Goldstein was a Jewish convert to the faith who actually established the Catholic Campaigners for Christ.
Okay. Yeah, let's hold it right there. Here's the music coming up. We're chatting with Karl Keating about radio replies and the priest, Rumble, and Carty. Stay tuned, folks.
This is Terry Barber reminding you there's a women's conference coming up September 7th, 2019 at the Sacred Heart Chapel. Mary Danielle Barber will be speaking along with Barbara Nicolosi. They're going to be talking about true femininity, be who you are. This is going to be for your daughters, your mothers. Every woman should be at this conference. And the way to do it is go to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with Karl Keating about the classic apologetic work, Radio Replies. We just got done talking about Father Rumble. Now we're talking about Carty. And, wow, Karl, so he would get in a car. He would drive around, I guess, the United States, preach through a loudspeaker, and then sell books out of his trunk.
Exactly.
That's apostolic work.
If there was a popular means. I mentioned just before the break David Goldstein, who was a well-known Jewish convert to the faith. He had been active as a socialist at the turn of the previous century, and converted, and along with a woman who was sort of his mentor. He started Campaigners for Christ, and apparently Carty was part of that operation. And Goldstein did the same thing. I actually have a photo of him with an open-top car where he would be standing up in it. And there was a kind of platform, there, a speaker's platform, and he'd have a big speaker stand outside that he'd set up. But he'd preach from this elevated platform of basically the back seat of the car, and that's the way he'd get his audiences. So that was at a time where outdoor speaking was a rather popular thing, at least in the warmer months of the year.
Sure.
But as I'm thinking about Rumble and Carty, Gary, I see in Rumble's history something that you could emulate toward. Okay. Because Rumble was ordained in 1927, and he began his weekly radio program not too long after that. I'm not exactly sure of the year. It might have been the next year. He continued it until 1968, so 40 years.
Wow.
I think it's the longest lived apologetics radio program in history. So 40 years is the target that I will hold out for you to see how Hands-On Apologetics will fare. I realize that if you make it to the 40-year mark, you might be a bit older than Father Rumble was when he laid down the microphone. But,
God willing, I'll be alive then.
But it's something for you to aim at. But it's good to know that, the kind of thing that you and I have been doing in recent years isn't original with us. I mean, we have precursors, and Leslie Rumble was sort of maybe the premier example of that. He must have been quite successful if he remained on the air for about 40 years. Yeah.
Especially, radio in Australia, I imagine that probably was pretty much close to the birth of, radio programming. So very, very early on.
That's right. Yeah, he began at least by say 1928, say no later than that or so. Yeah. And so radio as such as a popular medium didn't predate that by many years anywhere. So he was sort of firstest with the mostest.
Yeah.
And because of that, because of what he did, you and I have had a nice leg up on things in our own work because Rumble did so much of the homework for us.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, Karl, you've been in radio for quite a while. What kind of insights can you have into this set? Because I know it's not all, it's scripted, but it was on radio. And also, I imagine Carty, the question answers he got was probably live. What do you think? How has it influenced your own approach? You already mentioned a few things.
Well, I think one of the things is an attempt at concision. because Rumble is so good at giving a sufficient, even complete answer in relatively few words. He didn't ramble. He didn't beat around the bush. He was direct with his questioner, actually answered the question that was put to him. And as I said before, sometimes he'd get behind the question to what was probably really on the questioner's mind. But nevertheless, in all of that, he got to the point. So if you open any page of radio replies, you might find 5 or 6 answers on a single page. Okay, so many of them are only 24 words long as an answer. Few of them go on even half a page. Almost none of them, in fact. So concision, I think, was one thing, and I've tried to keep that in my own work, especially oral presentations, or whether I was on radio or speaking at a microphone in a conference or something, trying to keep to the point and try to keep in mind that the more I ramble, the less a listener will absorb. That's just the medium, the oral medium is such that
Yes.
You can't go on forever and expect people to retain much of it. You got to just get to the point and then move on. So I think that was one of the first things that came to my mind when I was going through radio replies. I said, okay, I see that it's more effective to give concise answers to questions. And then maybe if you want to flesh out a topic, have multiple questions on the same general issue, the questions themselves leading in a certain arc, and then answer each one as you go along, rather than one overarching question and one long answer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, very good. In fact, in some ways, radio replies is probably best suited now than it was back in the 20s and 30s. Because back then, people could retain a lot. They had much longer span of attention than we have now. And so,
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So in a sense, he's kind of head of the game.
Yeah. A lifetime before Rumble even started, there were the Lincoln Douglas debates, back in 1858. And those men would speak for hours, and the audience could follow what they were saying because they were used to that. Now people speak for seconds, and the audience gets lost.
Yeah. Right.
So it's a much different thing. So yes, your point I think is very astute. That the format that Rumble sort of perfected is actually more useful today than it would have been in his time.
Yeah, how ironic. Another thing, too, that I really enjoyed about the set was there are some questions that are a bit archaic. And, that it's no longer issues like, for example, Catholicism and public education or something like that. And I actually found that to be the most fascinating part of the volume because, I was like, gee, I wonder why he had a problem with this particular issue or this social thing that's coming up.
There's a lot of what you can get by reading the Q&As here is a sense of almost a historical photograph of the status of the church and society in general in the late 30s, early 40s. And, some of the things, as you say, are simply no longer issues. Nobody would bring them up anymore. Well, most of the things, of course, still are, and we keep hearing them. But still, on those things that are no longer so much issues, you begin to get a sense of the church living through history and dealing with the problems of a particular era, and working out a formulation of how to deal with the confusions of the time. Still, the large majority of, as I say, of what's in these 3 volumes is still just as relevant today as it was then. Yes. But there's a fair portion of things that nobody would think to ask today or nobody would question just because social arrangements have moved on.
Yes. Yeah, I actually appreciate that more because I don't have any skin in the game. I can appreciate both sides. And I find it interesting to see how, he reasoned through it and what he thought was persuasive.
Yeah, and I think your point there of saying you don't have skin in the game, these are things that you can appreciate the question as much as the answer.
Yes.
Those kinds of things give us an insight into human psychology and thinking maybe more than the things that are still in controversy today, because they allow us to be at arm's length from the whole thing and say, okay, I'm sort of looking omnisciently at the question and at the answer. How do they compare? How do they work with one another? And that helps us in our other work. It helps train our minds to understand better how people formulate questions and how those questions ought to be answered.
Yeah, very good. Well, before we're running here at the end of the program already. So what have you been up to? Have you completed any manuscripts or any books on the docket to be published?
I haven't completed any, so I don't want to be saying too much. I'm still finishing off a particular book on backpacking in my backpacking series. I'm partway through a book, which is my story of walking a pilgrimage route in Italy in May of this year.
Yes.
And I'm doing research on a book which will be a major book that I hope to come out next year. Will have to come out next year. It'll be a Catholic view on the history and ethical and moral questions regarding the atomic bombings of Japan. Next year will be the 75th anniversary.
Yeah.
So that's a major project. But so I've got three quite different books that are at different stages of work. And I'm going to ignore all of them next week because I'm going on a week-long backpacking trip. So.
Now, is this in preparation for a future book, or is it just for relaxation?
This is relaxation. Yeah, this one's just for relaxation. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, boy, what a fascinating topic in and of itself. We should probably have you on the show and kind of work us through the different issues, because I find that fascinating, the whole decision-making behind, dropping the bomb and the ethical issues.
Like a couple other books I've done, a lot of this book will be about the rhetoric of how people talk about the particular issue, understandings and misunderstandings. Every July and August, we see all kinds of articles and newspaper articles and magazine articles and see things online and commentary, people talking past one another. And every year seems to be no further progress made in coming to some overarching understanding.
True.
So much of what I'm going to do is be looking at the way people have understood and misunderstood things and how that's often been a drag on being able to reach a Catholic understanding on ethical and moral questions that come up, regarding these matters. So it's somewhat different approach. It's not pure history, although I have to deal with a lot of history.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Karl.
Gary, it's been great to be with you as always.
All right. Karl Keating, ladies and gentlemen, and you can check out a lot of his new books at www.karlkeating.com. Great stuff. Coming up next, High Impact Catholic Talk Radio with Terry and Jesse show. Actually, today will be lesser high impact because I'm going to be the guest on the show. And also coming up tomorrow, we're going to be talking with John Mark Rodi about the cardinal virtues and conversion. So, thank you so much for listening, folks, and I hope everybody has a wonderful, blessed day. Bye-bye.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.